Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Whisperer, a place where real stories from Reddit's darkest threads come to life. If you crave mystery, fear, and the thrill of the unknown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Now, let's step together into the shadows of today's story. All of the women in my family die at age 27. I turned 28 in 2 hours and 32 minutes. My dad always wanted a son. He got 3 daughters instead. He hated us all, hated my twin sisters, hated my mother, but hated me most of all because I was the last child my mother had before she died. That didn't stop him from treating me like his little boy. Didn't stop him from attempting to beat the hatred of my own gender into me. "Quit your crying," he'd snap, "or you'll end up like your sniveling bitch of a mother." After years of that shit, he was shocked that I grew up as a tomboy. I think he hated that even more because I was just a constant reminder of what he never got to have. My mother died when she was only 27, when I was only 4. The coroner ruled her death a natural passing, some weird heart complication that took her in her sleep. My dad, though, he says it was because of her family's curse. Whenever I came to him, desperate for more information about her mother, I never really knew. He never had much to say. I'm convinced he was just drunk since the day she died. Every woman in her damn family, they die when they're 27. He'd sputter in between belches, his breath reeking of stale beer. I think the real curse is that my mum was the purr. He was the burr. And my mum was the one to die, and not him. I wasn't fully convinced by the ramblings of a perpetually drunk man, but when I lost both of my sisters just months before their 28th birthday, I knew it couldn't be a coincidence. Moira was found murdered, her face practically blasted off by a shooter while she was on a jog. Joy took her own life only days later. I was the one who found her, hanging in the bedroom of her apartment as I came to pick her up for Moira's funeral. She'd been there, swinging from the rafters, all night. It's hard to live a normal life when you know you have an expiration date, especially when it encompasses an entire year. I always dreaded my birthday, which from an early age became associated less with fun and birthday cake and more with worry and funeral caskets. But once Moira and Joy died, my next birthday, 25, was the most dreadful day of my life. 26 was worse. 27, unimaginable. This is it, I thought, as I closed all of the blinds in my apartment, downing the last drop of vodka in the bottle. This is the last year of my life. 20-7 has been uneventful, to say the least. Why would I make any long-term plans, forge any meaningful relationships, when I know they simply cannot last? The worst part of this last year has been simply not knowing when my impending death is coming. It could have been any day, within the last 364. It could be within the next minute. I must admit I became something of a recluse. My windows always shuttered, additional locks installed in my door, letting the phone ring through to voicemail. Hiding under my covers with the lights out whenever I got a knock on my door. I stocked up on preserved foods and various goods that I would need to last the year. I was so paranoid that I even covered my mail slot, stuffed a towel in the space beneath my front door. I didn't want anything getting through from the outside. World, God forbid, an anthrax letter. Falling off the face of the earth didn't matter much. Anyway, I didn't have friends or family anymore. My mother and both of my sisters were dead, and my dad disowned me when I came out as a lesbian after my sisters died. I moved away and severed contact soon after. The night before my 27th birthday, I started getting these strange phone calls from a blocked number. I've always had anxiety about phone calls, so I just let it ring. The number kept calling at least once per day throughout the past year. Then the knocking started, once a week at first, but it's only been getting worse, more frequent, and the pounding on my door more frantic each time. Convinced it had something to do with my inevitable death, I've been driven mad by the unknown visitor. Especially over the past week, I got ready for bed last night, knowing that tomorrow, today, now is the day I will turn 28. My time had run out, and I searched for comfort in a bottle of liquor. I didn't find it. I fell into bed, drunk and delirious, and prayed the morning wouldn't come, though I knew it would. I eventually got to sleep, but it was restless and unsatisfying. The kind of sleep where you feel like you have one eye open, always watching. That's why I was quick to wake when the door to my bedroom creaked open early in the morning, before the first sign of light. I shot up in my bed, glancing around my room in a frenzied panic, at first seeing nothing out of the ordinary other than the door, pushed slightly ajar. A closer look revealed something I'd missed, something that sent my heart racing, froze me to my core. Two dark figures stood in the empty space behind the half-opened door, unmoving, almost like a pair of statues. Waiting, watching, wordless. Leave me alone, I squeaked, unable to move, paralyzed in the power of their presence. The shadowy figures instead shuffled out from behind the door, creeping slowly towards me in the dark. I knew this would certainly be the end of my life, the fulfillment of my curse, if I didn't act. Suddenly, recalling the self-defense methods I'd drilled into my mind, I flipped my bedside lamp on to stun the intruders and reached underneath the table to pull the knife I'd duct taped there a year ago, a 27th birthday gift to myself. As soon as the light flooded the room though, I knew the blade would be of no use. My intruders were not a pair of assassins, not human ones, at least. In the yellow light of the lamp, I discerned the identities of the dark figures. They were my sisters. Joy stood at the foot of my bed, pale. In that same conservative black dress I'd found her dead in years ago, the one she'd picked out for Moira's funeral. Her head hung parallel to her shoulders, neck grotesquely bent from her hanging. Moira was a few steps behind her. I could only assume it was her, considering the severity of her injuries. She'd suffered a gunshot wound to the head, so brutal that we were not allowed to see her after her death, so intense that it had entirely disfigured her face. The lower half of her face had been reduced to a pit of gore, her jawbone barely attached on one side, her mouth mangled, with only several teeth remaining, studied randomly throughout the mess. "Why are you here?" I cried, gathering my knees to my chest and holding them tight. Are you here to take me?" Joy made a feeble attempt to shake her head, the side of her face only brushing weakly against her shoulder. She waited several moments before putting one of her feet in front of the other, moving towards the side of my bed. As I recoiled instinctively, she slowed her pace. Moira trailed after her until they were both beside me. I whimpered as Joy leaned over me, her head flopping forward suddenly with the motion, neck cracking sickeningly. With her lips brushing against my ear, she whispered, She tried. Her speech was labored and wheezing, as if her vocal cords had nearly been shredded. "What do you mean, Joy?" I pleaded. Her lips moved against my ear once more, but no sounds came out despite a clear, strenuous effort. Moira wagered an attempt at answering my query, but only succeeded in sputtering blood from the gaping wound in her face, ejecting one of her remaining teeth onto the floor as her jawbone swung precariously, barely hanging on. She raised one hand, slowly curling it into a fist before striking her knuckles furiously against my bedpost, the incessant sounds startling me. I forced my eyes shut tight and pulled my knees even closer against my chest. Moira's knocking seemed only to escalate in volume, seemed to go on forever, until finally it stopped. I cracked my eyes open to find that both of my sisters had vanished, that the light of early morning had begun to spill in through the slats of my blinds. It was just past 6 o'clock, the 7th of June, the day of my 28th birthday. I was born at 9:26 a.m. once I learned of the curse. I burned the time of my ultimate expiration into my mind. I only had 3 hours and 16 minutes left to live, if I even had that long. Draping my covers over my head, I resolved to spend the rest of my life asleep. I figured I'd rather pass peacefully in my sleep like my mother did than to suffer a fate similar to my sister's. My plans were interrupted, however, by that damned knocking on the door. The interruption usually didn't come so early in the morning. I decided initially to ignore the strange visitor, but pulled the blankets back down soon after, as a certain sense of familiarity struck me. The pounding on the door reminded me all too much of Moira's knocking just moments before. It easily could have been a trick of the curse, but something compelled me to approach the door. "What do you want?" I called from behind the barrier, clinging to the relative safety it provided. The reply came from an unfamiliar man's voice. "I just have a letter for you, miss. Just slide it under the door, and please leave," I returned, using my bare foot to remove the towel. I used to block the small space beneath it. He deposited a bright yellow envelope under the door, as I requested. I waited quietly for the sounds of receding footsteps before sliding on a pair of gloves to handle the letter. It was addressed to me, simply by first name and with no address. Carefully, I unsealed the envelope to reveal a birthday card. I hadn't received one in years. Bright, sparkling letters on the front formed the words, "Daughter, you're 27. I scoffed at the sick joke. I hadn't received a birthday card since I was a child, and my dad couldn't even get my birthday. Right? I didn't think he even knew my address. I cracked it open gingerly to read the message inside. "Laura, if you're reading this, your father has killed me. Don't believe a thing he or the police say. I was not the target of a random attack. I did not die of natural causes, and I certainly did not commit suicide. I would never leave you if I had the choice. The truth is, I died is because I found the truth behind my family's curse and foolishly told your father. He was in on it the whole time, planted in my life by some secret society to eradicate me, to eradicate us. What we have is not a curse, it is a gift of immense power. The power to heal, but the power to harm just the same. We come into our power at the age of 28, a number associated with independence, leadership, and self-sufficiency, an age where we can handle the responsibility such a power inevitably comes with. It's a strong number, and you will come into great strength. Though you've always been a strong girl, I hope you've made it this far, but at the same time, I know you have. You were always a feisty little girl for the 4 years I had the pleasure of knowing you, of loving you. You never let anyone tell you what to think or do, especially not your father. Happy birthday, I love you. Mum, I closed the cards softly, thinking on the strained words of my sister. Moen tried to warn them, but they didn't listen. The pieces of the puzzle slid into place. My dad must have murdered Moira, and Joy ended her own life out of grief and a belief that she would inevitably be next. At the time of writing this, I only have 2 hours and 32 minutes until I officially turn 28. Over the past hour or so, I've already begun to feel the power flowing into my body, electrifying as it runs through my veins. I wield the towel to reposition itself under the door, and it does so, sliding across the floor on its own. I need to keep myself safe until 9:26. After all, I'm planning on surprising my father with a visit for my birthday. Last Sunday at 9:26 a.m., I turned 20-8. I suppose that sounds pretty uneventful on its own, but I'd grown up my whole life believing that I was cursed to die at 27, like the rest of the women in my family. It turns out that the curse was just a way to cover up the truth that at 28, I would develop extraordinary powers. My father had killed my mother and at least one of my sisters. Now, I was planning on leaving my story there, but I guess I underestimated just how hungry y'all are for a revenge tale. I wish I could say that what I'm about to tell you is just that, a simple tale of revenge, perfectly executed. A gaping, generational wound neatly closed with a few stitches. Having been lied to all of my life, I value honesty. I'm not going to lie to you. If that's what you're looking for, I suggest you stop reading now, because an entirely new source of terror has come to light after I read my birthday card last Sunday. I waited anxiously for the clock to hit 9:26. I'd been feeling the power start to trickle into me early in the morning, but once the second hand made its full lap around to move the minute hand to the tick just after the 5, a jolt of energy passed through my body. It was almost painful, like how I imagined being struck by lightning might feel, but at the same time, it felt good. I felt important, powerful, strong. So strong that it even scared me. As I eagerly accepted the full extent of my powers, I found myself in what I can only describe as a vision, an alternate setting that materialized all around me at once. Logically, I knew that I was still in my living room with my feet planted on the familiar wood flooring, but the ground beneath me felt rough, uneven, gritty. I glanced down to find myself standing upon a shelf of sandy rock, just steps from the edge of some great cliff. Fear rendered me mute at the top of that cliff, and I swear I could feel the wind whipping all around me, hear the waves crashing furiously below, feel the briny ocean water misting my face. I leaned forward, peering precariously over the edge at the churning sea and its infinite black and white froth. I found its movement back and forth, push and pull, comforting in its predictability, until it seemed as if something shifted to upset the flow. Something unseen, but its effects impossible to deny. There was something down there, something huge enough to alter the tides, yet hidden beneath the waves. More horrifying still was the palpable feeling that something wanted me to jump, to dive headfirst into the dark sea below. I felt a presence beneath the waters, something ancient, unseen, vastly more powerful than I could ever hope to be. And whatever it was, it wanted me to jump. But it didn't have to force me. It had all the time in the world, and it could wait. The vision fell apart as quickly as it had materialized, my comfortable reality reconstructing itself anew in mere seconds. I frantically shook my head to oust the troubling image, to rid myself of the powerful draw it had had on me. I had a job to do, but first, I had to figure out exactly what I could do. I knew I could move things simply by willing it to happen with my mind, but I was startled by the sudden ease of it. Focusing on a glass of water on the table, I attempted to move it just slightly to the left, but it instead flew off the surface, shattering as it hit the wall. I rushed to clean up the mess, plucking shards of glass from the carpet, groaning at the wet spot. To my surprise, once I glanced down at the dampened carpet, droplets of liquid started to rise from the floor until the spot had vanished. The condensation suspended in midair. It's hard to explain, but I just moved it until I finally released. To deposit the water in the sink. Before you say anything, I know. It was stupid to test this out on something so fragile. But my powers didn't exactly come with an instruction pamphlet. A dull ache grew in my heart as I realized. I should have been learning this with my mother, and I longed for her more than I had in years. Like a young child desperately reaching up with outstretched arms, I wanted my mummy. I couldn't help but think of the fear I felt the first time I got my period. It sounds silly, but I was bleeding and I thought I was dying, simply because I didn't have my mum there to explain it to me, and my dad couldn't be bothered to parent his child. My dad, the thought of him came with an overwhelming rage. With my senses alive in a way they'd never been before, I felt every cell in my body teeming with kinetic energy until the light bulb in the lamp beside me burst. I hesitated as I pondered the vision, but none of that was important just then. It was time I paid my old man a visit. Though he could never repay me for the losses I'd endured, I intended to collect the one thing that would come close, his miserable life. I started from my room to pack a small bag, but before I knew what had happened, I'd slammed headfirst into my bedroom door. "Shit," I muttered, rubbing a palm over what would certainly be a bruise forming across my forehead. I figured then that I could move much faster now, that I'd have to be careful. This certainly made preparing for my impromptu trip easier. So I was down in the garage much quicker than expected. I slid into my car and slipped my key in the ignition. A familiar paranoia forced me to hesitate before opening the garage door, but I pushed through it just as I pushed the button to meet the outside world for the first time in a year. Wincing. As the morning light spilled into the dark room, I guess I forgot just how bright the sun really is. I popped open the glove box to retrieve a pair of sunglasses. I put them on before pulling out of the garage, out of the safety I'd clung to for so long. The drive was fairly ordinary, though fear set in as I thought on all of the questions that remained unanswered. Why had my father killed my family? Why lie about some curse? And, most unnerving of all, who had delivered the letter? Was it just some trick to get me out of hiding? Was I wandering into a trap? To avoid spiraling deeper into uncertainty, fear, and worry, I spent some time thinking on my past. About my mother's death, then both of my sisters, within days of one another years later. I recalled coming out to my dad soon after that, in a desperate plea for acceptance, for love from my one remaining family member. Then I thought on his hateful response and the traumatizing attack I endured weeks later that solidified my decision to cut all ties and move away. We hadn't spoken in all of those years, but I was ready to face him at least, I hoped. I couldn't be sure what awaited me. Couldn't be sure at all. I parked on the street across from our old family home 6 hours later, where his old Navy truck sat in the driveway. I took a moment to collect myself at his front door, tightening my ponytail as I steeled myself for the task at hand. Then, I directed my energy into the barrier until it exploded inward, allowing my body to carry me at full speed into the living room, where I knew I'd find him. As expected, he was sitting there. What I didn't expect to see was the gun he had pointed at his head. I took hold of it with my mind, flinging it across the room. "Laura," he stammered, a dumb look on his face. What the hell are you doing here?" "The hell are you doing, Dad?" I retorted, gesturing to where the gun had fallen with a nod of my head. "How did you find me? Why did you send the letter?" A perplexed look crossed his features, one that told me he had no idea what I meant. His lack of knowledge did little to comfort me. Someone had still found me, had drawn me out of hiding. At that moment, I think he realized the situation he'd found himself in, what I intended to do. He started to scramble up from his chair, but I redirected my focus on his body, pressing him back into it. "You don't get to leave, Dad," I seethed. He coughed as I increased the pressure on his chest. "For once, you will listen to me." He strained against my influence, but he was stuck, and he knew it. "I know you killed Mum and Moira, maybe Joy, too. I know you lied about the fucking curse," I started, a flicker of anger surging as I acknowledged the harsh truth aloud. But the question I can't stop asking myself is, why? Why wait so long to kill us? Why even have us at all? Hesitating, he glanced frantically around the room for escape. I glared at his hands in his lap, then brought my attention to his thumb, filling it with my energy until the bones within shattered, an ivory shard piercing through his flesh. As I moved my stare to his index finger, he wailed in agony, interjecting, "No, don't. No. Okay. Shit." He took a deep breath as blood spurted from his maimed appendage. I was supposed to have a son. When your mother failed to provide one, I was told to. I was told to kill her off, to wait to see if you or your sisters could have a son. I just did as I was told. A cowardly response from a cowardly man. Who told you? I pressed, pulling his index finger back slowly, waiting. He didn't respond until after I'd snapped a digit at the knuckle. "People-lease," he begged, tears running down his wrinkled face. He looked at his mangled hand, horrified as his middle finger began to lift next. Some sort of cult. They breed the women in your family. The women are killed under the curse, and their sons quietly taken away. I don't know what they want with them, but they said, all I had to do was give them a son, then kill your mother, your sisters, you, and I'd be set for life. But you and your sisters, you bitches, you weren't having any children, especially not you. When you told me that you'd gone against God, I realized that you'd never have any kids, that you were the only one left. So I took measures into my own hands. With that admission, I crumpled his entire hand into itself, his splintered bones jutting out at all angles. "You don't mean..." I breathed, my voice cracking despite my efforts not to give him the satisfaction of having hurt me. He groaned in pain before returning with a low, guttural laugh. You didn't think that attack was random, did you?" he asked, wheezing. Harsh memories of the brutal invasion forced upon me, the assault I'd endured, resurfaced all. At once, suddenly taking on a new meaning as I understood my father's part in my trauma, that he'd sent my attacker. Both my focus and my hold on him broke. He leapt up, surprisingly quick on his feet after years of sedentary alcoholism. I attempted to will him back to his original position, but I couldn't. I felt like a little girl once more, cowering by the stairs as her daddy's shadow loomed closer. I was weak, powerless again in the face of my father, a man who'd done nothing but hurt me, a man who'd ruined my life in more ways than I could have possibly known. I tore after him, through the kitchen and down the hallway, until I finally cornered him, taking hold of him and slamming him into a wall. A salty odor perfumed the air as a wind swept through. Did it make you feel like a big fucking man to take everything from me? To kill my mother? To take my sisters away? I screeched in an unearthly bellow. An incomprehensible power flowed in and out of me. I watched, frozen, as the bones of his feet crushed all at once. He howled as the crunching progressed up his lower legs, knees popping, then further still. By the time his thigh bones snapped in a gruesome compound fracture, his mouth just hung open. Did it make you feel strong too? And despite the magnitude of power coursing through me, I fell silent, unable to complete the sentence, unable to say it aloud. Your own fucking child, Dad. I took a deep, calming breath before willing the flesh of his face in alternate directions. A fissure formed first in the center of his forehead, then splintered down the bridge of his nose, ripping his face in two. Your little plan worked though, Dad. I did get pregnant. I got rid of it, of course. I teased, leaning forward to add in a whisper, I wonder if it was a boy. He opened his mouth to fight back, but I was done listening. Do they know I'm alive? I demanded, widening the growing wound until the two sides had separated completely. They didn't, he sputtered, blood dribbling out of his lying mouth. But they sure as shit will now, ... And they were on their way already. He was right, it wasn't wise to stick around. I pulled my knife from my back pocket, positioning the blade at one side of his neck before dragging it across his throat until I'd sliced him ear to ear. I could have killed him with my newfound powers, but this is something I wanted to do by hand. The relief it brought was short-lived. I returned to my car and immediately set a course back for home. I needed answers, and I needed them. Yesterday, I could no longer ignore the power of the illusion I'd experienced that morning. I'm hesitant to admit it even now, but I found myself back there on that cliff again in my father's house. The clamor of the waves pounding against rock drew me in, forcing me to step to the very edge, forcing me to stare into the sea far below. A feeling of unbridled hatred extended itself to me there. That time, I didn't attempt to rid myself of the strange vision. That time, I welcomed it. And I lost myself for a moment, surging with uncontrollable power, a mere spectator as his lower half was maimed. More than that, I said I wouldn't lie to you, and I won't, but I did lie to my father. I didn't get rid of my child in the way I'd insinuated. Part of me wanted to prove that I could be a better parent than he was, but I knew I couldn't. So, I gave him away. I sped down the highway home infinitely more terrified than when I'd left. I needed to find the source of the letter. I needed to figure out what the hell the visions meant. I needed to know if I'd unwittingly opened myself to something sinister, and more importantly, I needed to know that my child was safe from the cult that so desperately wanted him. I need to find my son.